So thanks, Anna. And building off of what you were talking about before with the clinical description of Crohn's disease, we'll expand this discussion a bit to the broader condition of inflammatory bowel disease, which takes on both flavors of Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. And as we know, and we just talked about, finding concept sets and finding the clinical definitions of things based on code lists is a key piece to this. And obviously, a lot of our definitions take one code or greater than one code or two codes as a base definition. However, a lot of these complex conditions, if you really think about it, some of these conditions can go on for many years. They can relapse and remit. And so different logic may need to be built in to have clinician specialty as part of a base definition, or different treatments and/or take into account other logic. And so I'll take a little bit of time going through some of the logic. So here's one definition of inflammatory bowel disease that just takes greater than one or more IBD diagnoses. We took a published, validated algorithm that really sought to get at a very specific and be used to define incident diagnosis. And we converted this clinical definition and phenotype that was done in claims-based environments into the Odyssey Atlas instance. And Jamie Weaver really helped us build this Atlas cohort. And you'll see right off the bat, 4 years of prior observation period of time to truly get at incidence. And many of our databases, then this would make it very, very specific. And a first diagnosis from a specialist with another diagnosis of a specialist within a year. And then a variety of no prior therapies based on, except if it was used to treat other conditions, to truly define an individual that had incident IBD. And I can switch to our, oh boy, this is where I fail. Okay, our cohort definition, which we were able to put out into the public Atlas system. And so here's a condition occurrence of inflammatory bowel disease for the first time in a patient's history. And then we have several of these inclusion criteria that are satisfied, or that need to be satisfied to get at the specific incident diagnosis of IBD. And so obviously, databases that don't have specialist information are not going to be able to comply with these types of definitions. So you still need to know your underlying data sources that are contributing to these. But you can see that throughout, you can build these complex logic-based systems to really get at a complex clinical definition. And I don't think I was going to go through all of these, but you can see how Atlas can be utilized to identify these. So, Anne, I was keeping it very brief because I wanted to leave some time for questions and discussions as well.
Sure, and we, in fact, do have more time.
There is a good question in the chat there about the extent to which specialty information is captured in a lot of the OMOP databases, because it would be very, very valuable as an asset. So just curious about your own empiric experiment or experience with the definition that you're proposing there, and how it's run in data sources that you guys have access to.
Yeah, so if you meet a gastroenterologist, they will tell you that no one has IBD until a gastroenterologist tells you that you have IBD. I think that may be true for many of our other fellow subspecialties on the line as well. And so, yes, if you run this in a database that does not have good capture of specialty, it will look like you have 0 people. Do you have 0 people? No, there are really people in there who have IBD, but because once you put in these specified logics, you will lose those people. But if you truly want to get IBD diagnosed by a GI physician, then we're going to need better data. But I think I've been screaming for better data for most of my career.
One other thought there, I couldn't remember if it was in your definition, but I think one of the reasons that might be the most trusted source is that they typically are the ones running the camera up. So if there's a procedure occurrence of colonoscopy, maybe that would be a good surrogate that might be better captured in our network of data sources.
Yeah, so absolutely. Refining logic based on available data is important. I would argue that as you're planning your clinical descriptions, to stay agnostic to how the data is, right? You need to be focused on what the clinical concept is and the clinical idea first, not backing into it based on the data pieces. But then we do need to be very mindful of what data sources are contributing to various network studies and how these phenotypes would operate in these different situations.
Great, thanks.
Maybe as a general note to Evan's question, I think there's two things. One thing is that our tools allow us to model a logic based on specialty, and the ETL and the OMAP itself include that information in a very structured way, in a way that you can retrieve it in a tool like Atlas. We'll talk next week about evaluation of those design choices that you will make and how it would look at a particular data source, and that would be a great example where it might work in some data sources and might not work on others. And I think that's the experience that Kevin had when he actually ran this in internal data sources. You'll be able to understand that measure of loss in every database also compared to each other. And I think the other point is that it's not, many times it's not an ETL, because I think the question in the chat was like, do we have it, do we have that information available in the OMAP instance? Again, that also depends on the institution ETL, but there is the ability to make it available. In our cases, we found that when it exists in the data source and we're able to capture it, but it's something that you necessarily will need to evaluate.
And to add on to what Oz is talking about, it's not just the data, it's understanding the provenance of the data and why the data was collected, right? So in a UK-based, GP-based database, you could be diagnosed with IBD once, and you really do truly have IBD. Same with diabetes, because you're not then getting billed for that every single encounter. It may be an entirely different phenotype that operates well in that type of environment versus a United States system where you might get diagnosed with IBD just to go and get the prior auth approved to go and have the colonoscopy. Do you have IBD? No, you don't. You have one code for IBD to get yourself prior auth to be able to even have the colonoscopy, that then the GI doc would be able to make that diagnosis. And so these are some of the things where we need to understand how healthcare is provisioned, as well as how data is collected and how that data is provenanced into our various data sources.
And actually, to Oz's point about the evaluation, I want to make sure that we also touch on the next steps for study leads and those who want to participate, and then we can talk more about what we were talking about, just to make sure that we cover this. For the next steps, for the study leads, we have a specific point in time this week as opposed to previous week. If you want us to run cohort diagnostics on your cohorts so that you can examine them and see what kind of patients you capture, we will need you to indicate in the spreadsheets which cohorts are ready by the end of the business day on Friday, so that we can run it over the weekend and discuss it next week. So for the study leads, please engage the people who said they're interested in the channels to come together to build the cohorts together. We have 2 office hours, Wednesday 10 a.m., Friday 9 a.m. that you can come to if you have any questions, if you want coordination, if you want to pull in more people. Anything else, come to the office hours or shoot us an email. And the expectation is that if you want us to run the cohort diagnostics to look at the patients this week, please have the cohorts or the subset of the cohorts ready by Friday. Those who want to participate, if you haven't already, please reach out to the study leads so they have you in the books. Patrick was very nice to tag people in the channels, but of course there may be more people who become interested in the studies. Please either reach out to the study leads or to me, Azza, or Gotham to participate in cohort building this week. And also come to the office hours on Wednesday 10 a.m. and Friday 9 a.m. Eastern Time. All of the meetings are happening in the work group, Phenotype Development and Evaluation. If you don't have access to the work group, please let us know. We will add you. And now I'm back to your fun conversation, guys, about Crohn's disease, which I learned should not use apostrophe. That was a very useful goal for me.
I know one more comment for next week, since you mentioned that we have about 60 definitions that were in the list that exist in our library. For study leads who are not aware and didn't see that, if you listed your definition in the tracker that Anna made, I went ahead and I gave the cohort ID for the existing similar phenotype in the library, and that would be your starting point if you don't want to start from scratch for both concept sets and a logic. But come to the office after hours if you're not clear. But if you open that tracker and your phenotypes are there and the definition exists in the library, I already went ahead and put the ID for you.
Quick question. If the definition exists in the library, do you guys want a clinical description? And some in the library don't have a clinical description, and maybe it's a good way we can benefit the broader community by contributing one. And I just didn't know if we wanted to be updating existing phenotypes with clinical descriptions.
How would you know
if we didn't develop them?
How would you know that something in the phenotype library fits your study if you don't have a clinical description? So yes, please do have one. And
all I'm saying is there's lots in there that don't have clinical descriptions, so we're happy to kind of configure ones that seems fit for the way the definition is configured.
You should have clinical description that fits your study specifically, not what's in the library, but what fits your study specifically.
Sure thing. Okay.